The day I came home, the house remembered me, but the faces at the door did not. By the time the sun slid behind the palms, my son's voice had turned my heartbeat into an empty hallway. The taxi idled at the curb, and Central Phoenix glowed the way it only does after a dry heat day. Gold dust running off stucco, bougainvillea screaming magenta like it had something to prove. My cane clicked once on the sidewalk. My hip pulsed a dull ache from the surgery. 3 weeks trapped in bleached sheets and boiled chicken, learning to sleep upright while nurses whispered about fevers that wouldn't quit. I'd pictured this moment like a reward. My creaky old ranch house on a quiet street near 44th and Camelback, the one Charlie and I sanded and painted and forgave over 3 decades. Citrus trees we nursed through bad winters. The porch swing he hung on a dare. Coming home was supposed to feel like stepping back into a photograph. Instead, Daniel, my only son, my boy with the cowlick and the calculus trophies, filled the doorway like a bouncer. "Mom," he said. Not "hey," not "you're back," just "Mom," shaped thin and formal like a receipt. Behind him, I caught a slice of movement. Vanessa, in one of those expensive tops that drape just so, her blonde ponytail smooth as a new rope, and 2 silhouettes I barely recognized but had heard plenty about. Her parents, Gregory and Lillian Pike, Scottsdale Polish, country club tans that never wash off. "You shouldn't have come today," Daniel said. "We weren't ready." My mouth went dry. I called before the discharge. "This is hard." He took a breath, swallowed. "Everything changed while you were in the hospital. The house is no longer in your name." The taxi's meter chirped behind me. A sprinkler hissed somewhere. I stared at my son the way you stare at a stranger who wears a familiar jawline. "What did you just say?" My voice came out steady, a miracle. "Daniel handled it," Vanessa said, gliding into view with a smile I'd spent 2 years trying and failing to like. "It's just logistics, Evelyn. Downsizing, safety. We've boxed your personal things. We can arrange delivery wherever you're staying." "Where I'm—" The cane bit into my palm. The porch boards creaked. I could feel the knot in the wood Charlie never sanded all the way down. "You used my power of attorney?" Daniel's eyes flickered. He'd been there the day before surgery when I initialed a stack of forms in a fluorescent-lit room, one of them naming him for medical decisions because the anesthesiologist wanted assurances, and I was too afraid to read more than the first paragraph. Because he was my son. "It covered financial matters, too," he said. "Temporary. We needed to make moves while you recovered." "Moves." I looked past him. My photo frames were gone from the entry table, replaced with a sleek bowl that didn't belong to anyone so much as it belonged to a catalog. On Vanessa's ears, emerald studs sparkled. Not mine. I kept those at the bank, but the thought arrived anyway, ugly and sticky. "Gregory, Lillian," I nodded at the shadows behind my son. "You planning on moving in?" Lillian lifted her chin, her lips pursed like a critique. Gregory offered a politician's regret. "This is for your own good, Evelyn. A big house is a lot. Daniel's made responsible decisions." Responsible? I had taught bank compliance in rooms where men twice my salary took notes. I'd walked widows through fine print until their hands stopped shaking. Responsibility had a smell, and it was not this. "You need to step aside," Daniel said. "We'll forward your mail. We'll arrange your medications. Don't make this harder." Something broke inside me, but it wasn't what they expected. Not a collapse, not pleading. It was a steadiness I hadn't felt since I ran teams under deadlines that ate reputations for breakfast. "Enjoy the bowl," I said, and lifted my chin. I turned, cane ticking a metronome. At the curb, I caught the driver's eye and said, "2 miles west." "Ma'am?" he asked. "Anywhere that's not here." I texted before the cab rolled, "Plan B. E." The reply from Lydia Brooks came in under 10 seconds. Safe place secured. Sending address. On my way. We met the first week of freshman year at Arizona State, 2 girls with thrift store blazers and righteous opinions. 45 years later, Lydia was the lawyer you wanted if you'd ever signed something you shouldn't have. She had a silver bun that meant business and a voice that could make a judge apologize for calling recess. She found me in a short-stay hotel off Thomas Road, a suite someone had designed to offend no one, and comfort even fewer. The bedside clock glowed 5:12 in hospital red. Lydia's hug was gentle on my hip, fierce on my heart. "Tell me what they said," she murmured, setting her leather portfolio on the tiny desk. I repeated Daniel's lines until they sounded as absurd to me as they had on the porch. Lydia's face did not change. It hardened. "They used the POA while you were sedated and fevers were stacking up," she said. "We'll challenge. If they transferred title out of your revocable trust, Charlie's signature would have been required back when we drafted it. And he's not signing anything from the cemetery." The laugh that fell out of me was half sob. "I didn't read the addendum before surgery. That's on me." "No," she said. "Trusting your son is not a legal error." Lydia slid a printout to me, rows of numbers marching like ants. "And it's worse. While you were intubated, somebody authorized 5 transfers from your Vanguard account, $230,000 total, into 3 shell LLCs. The signatures are digital and supposedly yours. I already flagged them with the bank's fraud unit." I traced the names of the companies with my finger. Papago Redevelopment Group, Arcadia Vista Holdings, 28th Street Capital. They sounded like condos wearing expensive cologne. "Real estate," I said. Lydia nodded. "The Pikes run a consultancy with a trail of complaints from seniors who mysteriously lost homes, and Vanessa's resume is a graveyard of mortgage shops shuttered for regulatory violations. They have a zoning application on the city's docket to flip your entire block to mixed use near the light rail expansion. If they control enough parcels, they triple their money before construction," I finished. Numbers had always been my first language. "And they use my name to buy credibility, and your accounts to buy leverage," Lydia said. I leaned back, eyes on the popcorn ceiling, memories tumbling. Vanessa's innocent questions about whether I'd updated beneficiaries, Daniel's interested tilt when I mentioned where the safe deposit key lived, my own refusal to connect the dots because connecting them would have turned my son into an accomplice before I was ready to think that word. "Do we go to the police?" I asked. "We go to the right police," Lydia said. "I already called a friend in the bureau. You'll like her, but first we gather, we document, we walk into your house while they're sloppy, and we let their own mouths do the work." "Break in," I raised an eyebrow. "Evelyn," she said, a ghost of a smile, "you're not breaking into your own home." We built a list on the hotel notepad, my printing slower and sharper than it used to be. Bank records, trust documents, POA addendum, zoning petitions, neighbor sale prices, emails. My cane leaned against the desk like a third teammate. At midnight, alone in the chemical quiet, my phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel. Need your investment passwords to set up an annuity for your long-term care. Send ASAP. I stared until the words blurred. Then I powered the phone down and slid it under the pillow like it could warm me the way Charlie's calf had. A lifetime ago, we lived so long in the same bed, I still rolled toward the weight that wasn't there. In the morning, I put on lipstick, not because it mattered to anyone, because it mattered to me. I had raised a boy to tell the truth and respect what wasn't his. The man at my door had believed a cheaper story. That afternoon, while the heat rose off the asphalt in visible shivers, I balanced my cane and pulled open the side gate to the house with the swing. Somewhere, a mockingbird practiced other birds' songs until the lies sounded perfect. It was not going to sing in my house again. If you're listening, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your city in the comments. If this story resonates, a like helps more folks find it. And if you want more true heart, first-person journeys like this, feel free to subscribe. I'm here, one breath at a time. The side door had a habit of sticking in summer, and there it was, stubborn at the hip like me. The key turned, the wood sighed, and I stepped into air that smelled like someone else's candle, vanilla and ambition. I hugged the wall and paused at the kitchen threshold. Voices drifted from my study, the room with Charlie's old campaign desk facing the window, because he always said he worked better if he could see the grapefruit ripen. "Henderson's close Friday," a male voice said, first language swagger under a desert accent. "Gregory. Once that's done, we're at 40% on the block." "And the refinancing on the Wilsons?" Another man, less sure, an associate, someone who checked the locks twice and still didn't sleep. "Signed. We used the bank credentials we acquired to grease underwriting." A pulse thrummed between my ears. Bank credentials, mine, then likely my neighbor's. The ones who waved casseroles to my door when Charlie died and watered my camellias when I was out of town. I thumbed my phone, opened the voice memo app, and tapped the red dot like it was a detonator. "Hello, Greg," I said, pushing the study door. "Enjoying the view my husband loved?" 3 men froze. Gregory recovered first, standing too fast, smile snapping into place. "Evelyn, you gave us a scare." "Lawsuits often do," I said softly. He took a step. "This is inappropriate." "This is my home." I moved to the filing cabinet, the one we'd bought at an estate sale, because Charlie liked that it still smelled faintly of carbon paper. My fingers found the bottom drawer, the false back, the envelope where I'd kept a copy of the trust certificate because paper beats everything when Wi-Fi goes down. "And this," I added, "is my trust. You can't transfer trust property without both trustees. Lydia didn't sign anything because Lydia doesn't sign for thieves." The younger associate, slick hair, jittery knee, flashed a look at the window that meant flight. "Mr. Pike, I should—" "Stay," Gregory said without looking at him, his voice suddenly knife-flat. To me, he smiled again, wolfish. "You really should be resting, Evelyn. Do not ever tell me what to do in my house." He tried a new angle. "Daniel told us your mind's being inconsistent. Post-op confusion, it's not unusual." "Daniel told you," I repeated, a clean, precise rage unfolding like a fresh sheet. "Then you must know the difference between confusion and fury." His face thinned. "Leave your phone on the desk." I glanced at the memo app, still recording, and at the black button tucked under the silicone case, a habit from my years in compliance when we ran point on high-dollar fraud. A silent panic alarm tied to a 24/7 dispatch line. It had felt paranoid when Lydia insisted I keep it. It felt like insurance now. "You used my credentials," I said. "Say it again." "Give me the phone," Gregory said, and this time he moved quick. He grabbed my wrist and squeezed until pain flashed up my forearm. The cane slipped, clanged on the hardwood. My hip screamed in a high, bright key. I gasped but didn't drop the phone. A voice ripped the front door in half. "FBI, hands where we can see them." Agent Erin Harper swept in first, her jacket unzipped, her badge glinting like a coin. Agent Min Nguyen flanked her, cool and coiled. 2 more agents filled the hallway. Gregory's hand released me as if I burned. "Ma'am," Harper said, her gaze flicking from my face to my arm, "are you hurt?" "Only his pride," I said, breathless and shaking. I held up the phone, showing the red recording bar. "But I brought you something." 3 hours later, under ceiling tiles the color of forgotten tea, I sat in a federal interview room with Lydia at my left, Agent Harper at my right, and a stack of documents in the middle that could ruin lives or rebuild one. "Your recording captures admissions about unauthorized use of banking credentials," Harper said. "Combined with the transfers Ms. Brooks flagged and the zoning dossier, we have probable cause for warrants on Pike-controlled entities, devices, and premises." "And my house?" I asked, the words still mine in my mouth. Harper slid a stamped order across the table. "Emergency injunction. No sale, no encumbrance, no occupancy changes without court approval. The deed transfer itself is under challenge. The trust structure is your friend." I nodded, swallowed, nodded again. The world comes apart and returns in small legal sentences, and sometimes that is the only mercy. "They'll argue you consented," Nguyen said. "That you were confused. We'll need medical records to establish your capacity at the time." I thought of the antiseptic theater of long nights, of a nurse I liked, with a tattoo of a sparrow she named after her grandmother, of the way the fever made everything tilt. "Take whatever you need," I said. "All of it." "Tonight we execute warrants at this address," Harper said, tapping my street on the map. "And at Pike Consulting in Old Town Scottsdale, we have a federal magistrate standing by." Lydia touched my hand, cool and reassuring. "You don't have to be present." "This is my house," I said. "I'm done being absent." We parked 2 blocks over at dusk, the heat's angry fist finally relaxing. Agents in windbreakers moved like a sentence you don't want to read but can't ignore. Porch lights bloomed up and down the block. Neighbors drifted to sidewalks in loose clusters, faces lit with worry and the forbidden thrill of being near someone else's drama. Vanessa answered the door, confused, then pale, then pure fury as badges flashed. "This is harassment," she spat. "My father is also being interviewed," Harper said. "Please step aside." Daniel appeared behind her, colorless. Our eyes caught and held. For a moment, he was 9 again, solemn and mud-streaked, handing me a baby mourning dove he'd found under the oleanders. Then he became the man who stood between me and the life I built. "Mom?" he said, as if the word had edges he hadn't noticed until now. "What is this?" "Consequence," I said. I kept my voice low so it wouldn't carry to the hedges. "For theft." He blinked and began to shake his head. Vanessa's fingers found his arm, anchor or leash, I couldn't tell. Agents strode past them with boxes and scanners and sealed bags. The day my son married Vanessa, I gave them my grandmother's Irish linen napkins, thinking we were weaving families. Watching now, I understood we had handed thread to someone who built snares. "Mrs. Ward," an agent called from the hall, "we'll need access to the study safe." "There's no safe," Vanessa said quickly. "There's a safe," I said, matching her tone. "Behind the Thornton painting, right side of the mantel. Combination is my wedding date backward. It's not that original." Vanessa turned on me, civilized mask slipping. "You think you've won?" "I think I'm awake," I said. They took her first, in cuffs that clicked too loudly in my ears. Daniel turned on me with something like pleading. "I didn't know all of it," he said hoarsely. "I swear I didn't know." "Then say what you did know," I said, and let his words try themselves on my face so he could see the verdict arrive. After, Harper walked me back to Lydia's car. The smell of hot creosote lifted from the ground like prayer. "There's a chance," Harper said carefully, "that the medical records reveal unusual access." "What do you mean?" "That someone logged into your chart repeatedly without proper authorization. Family, sometimes. Sometimes not." She met my eyes. "We've seen situations like this become more than financial cases." For a long time, the only sound was the tick of the engine. Lydia's hand found my shoulder. "Whatever it is," she said, "we face it." "Of course," I said, and then I realized my teeth were chattering, though the air was still 90 degrees. I pressed my tongue to the back of my teeth to quiet them. "Of course." Across the street, my porch swing moved in the night breeze, empty, creaking, insisting on the idea of the past. Federal buildings never quite master comfort. The interview room smelled faintly of coffee left to die. A black camera peered from the corner like a patient spider. I sat where Agent Harper told me, and I told the story the way I used to tell examiners. The facts first, the fear after. When I finished, Nguyen tapped a folder. Judge signed all 5 warrants: Scottsdale office, Pike residence, 2 storage units, your house, 1 out-of-state condo. "And?" Lydia asked. "And something else," Harper said. "We pulled your patient access logs from St. Luke's Midtown. Your records were viewed at 1:13 a.m., 3:54 a.m., and 5:22 a.m. on 3 separate nights, by a nurse not assigned to your care. The same nurse called a number associated with a Pike LLC immediately after each access." My tongue went dry enough to splinter. "What did she do in my chart?" "Adjusted pain meds upward against your attending physician's standard orders," Nguyen said. "Flagged your discharge as pending infection twice without lab support. We aren't doctors. But it looks like someone engineered a delay." Engineered, the clinical word sat like a nail in my mouth. "Name?" Lydia asked, already shaking her head in contempt of whatever answer came. "Cara Mills," Harper said. 3 years in post-op. Clean record until 6 months ago, which is when payments begin showing up from an LLC managed by Lillian Pike. It was an old trick, just new to me in this particular hell. If you need time to commit a crime, build your own weather. Does Daniel... I started, and then I wasn't sure whose mercy I was begging. "We've seen no text to him about medical specifics," Harper said. "Yet." Lydia's hand moved to cover mine. "We'll let the evidence tell us, not our fear." Back in my hotel, I held my phone like a fragile relic. My face in the black screen looked older than I'd remembered. I tried to picture the moment Cara Mills decided to do the Pike's bidding. Did the money hit her account with a thumbs-up emoji, or did she stare at the numbers and tell herself a story about how it wasn't that bad? When sleep finally came, I dreamed of Charlie on the porch swing. his hand warm, the chain groaning a rhythm like the old ceiling fan. "You can't make people tell the truth," he said gently, "but you can make the truth tell on them." In the morning, Harper called. "Vanessa wants counsel. Gregory and Lillian are doing that thing where rich people pretend they're too offended to speak. And Daniel—" "Yes?" "He asked to see you through his public defender. Your call." Lydia and I stood in the hallway outside a room with a mirrored window. My hip ached in that particular voice it used when the barometric pressure shifted, even though Phoenix doesn't have the decency to let us blame the weather for anything. "He'll lie," I said. "A little, maybe a lot, and he'll tell the part he thinks I'll believe." "You'll know," Lydia said. Then Daniel sat across from me, hands folded, jaw shadowed with a beard he never wore when life was orderly. He tried a smile, then let it die. "I didn't mean for any of this," he said. "I wanted to buy time. Vanessa said—" "Stop with Vanessa," I said quietly. "What did you do?" He winced like I'd asked him to pull a tooth. "I brought you the POA packet. I didn't read the addendum either. Vanessa said her dad's lawyer included standard language to keep the lights on. When you were in the ICU, they said we needed to move money into a safer vehicle for you. That annuity line I texted you. I signed on your behalf on 2 transfers. They did the rest." "Did you know they were buying neighbors out with predatory terms?" I asked. "Did you know they filed to rezone the block?" "The rezoning, yes. I thought it would raise everyone's value. I told myself that meant we were helping." His mouth twisted. "I know what that sounds like." "I do. Did you know someone accessed my medical chart in the middle of the night? That my pain meds were bumped to keep me foggy? That my discharge got pushed so they could sign more papers while I couldn't walk unaided to the sink?" He flinched so hard his chair scraped. Color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. "I swear to you," he whispered. "No." I stared. That old, unreliable muscle in my chest wanted to believe, tender and eager as a dog. But I made myself wait, the long, quiet beat that always separated truth from panic. Daniel looked up, eyes glass bright and furious at himself. The anger was not for me. It was for the mirror. "Okay," I said. "Then be useful." He nodded once. "I'll tell them everything I signed. Every time I looked away when I shouldn't. Every link in the chain." When he left, I pressed my palms flat on the table until I felt the tacky ring of someone else's coffee. Lydia didn't say "I told you so" or "I warned you" or any of the sentences we always think but shouldn't say. She just said, "Next move?" "Home," I said. The first time back, I stood on my own porch with a key that fit and a code to a new alarm Lydia's security guy installed before the ink dried on the injunction. The door swung open. The house exhaled someone else's lemon cleaner. The changes were surgical, the mantel arrangement curated for a magazine I'd never read. My recipe box gone from its spot beside the stove, replaced by a tablet stand. Charlie's desk rotated to face the door instead of the window, as if the person who sat there didn't trust surprises. The orchids in the dining room were gone. The little humidity tray was dry and dusty. I walked like a slow-motion detective through the rooms, my cane tapping a metered grief. In the bedroom, Vanessa's garment bags hung where my cotton dresses used to breathe. My old jewelry tray was empty, but I knew from Harper that most of what mattered had been found in a Pike storage unit, tagged and bagged and waiting to testify. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer third from the left. If some burglar ever needed to know me, that drawer would have been enough. Rubber bands that had lost their snap, a tape measure, 3 wine openers, and the dumb brass key to the gate Charlie rehung twice because the spring was tricky. Touching the key steadied me. I put it in my pocket like a talisman. "Stay tonight?" Lydia asked from the doorway. "Yes," I said. "If I leave now, the house will think it beat me." We slept lightly, the way women do when they know a place loves and mistrusts them in equal measure. At 2, I woke to the creak of the swing outside and a memory of Kara's hands pushing the IV pole I wasn't sure was real. I made tea the way my mother taught me, kettle, not microwave, and stood by the sink watching the grapefruit tree throw shadows on the fence. "Charlie," I said into the quiet, "I'm making the truth tell on them." From the hallway, Lydia's voice answered in her sleep. "Damn right." I learned a long time ago that justice is a calendar game. Arraignment dates, motion deadlines, evidentiary hearings, all the choreography that looks like stalling until it doesn't. While the city baked through another week of relentless sun, the Bureau unpacked a life's worth of lies. Agents carried out hard drives and file boxes and 2 clunky external safes covered in stickers that made Lillian look ridiculous in ways she surely never imagined. In one photo, she posed next to a charity golf tournament banner. In the files, she was matching invoices to shell accounts like she was running a lemonade stand, not a criminal conspiracy. Harper and Nguyen set aside a corner of their bullpen for us, my case map on the wall, Lydia's tabs unfurling like party streamers only lawyers enjoy. Every big case has a pivot document. Ours was an email chain headed Timeline Adjustments, where Vanessa asked Kara which med events were easiest to nudge without raising flags. Kara answered with alarming cheerfulness, like they were swapping makeup tips. Daniel began meeting with the assistant U.S. attorney assigned to the Financial Crimes Unit. His public defender, a young man with compassionate eyes named Chris Foley, prepped him hard and told him the only way out was through. I didn't ask to sit in on the proffers. I had all the confession I could carry. On a Thursday morning, Lydia and I found a bench outside the federal courthouse. The building is a glass and copper heat trap that pretends to be shade. We sat in our own sweat and watched white shirts and legal pads go in and out. "He'll probably take a deal," Lydia said. "I know." "You don't have to speak at his sentencing. The court may ask, but you don't have to." "I know." The words felt like 2 rocks in my mouth. "I also know what he was like when he was small. Both are true." "Both can be true," she agreed. That night, Vanessa's attorney petitioned for bail reduction with a straight face, arguing she was not a flight risk. The judge looked at the asset list and the stack of passports and denied it. In the gallery, I exhaled for the first time in 10 days and didn't realize until Lydia squeezed my hand that I'd been holding my breath since the porch. The next morning, I found a letter from Daniel in my mailbox, soft and thin as apology. He wrote in pen that blotched where his hand stuttered. He confessed to smaller corruptions that didn't make it into indictments, how he told himself my recipe box made the counter look cluttered, and that his minimalist aesthetic was somehow a higher truth, how he replaced my curtains without asking because the fabric reminded him of his grandmother's dress in a photo he hated, how he wrote downsizing in a to-do list and put my name beside it like it was laundry. If you need to measure the shape of a betrayal, don't count the felonies at first. Count the domestic edits, the quiet erasures. I stood in the kitchen holding my son's letter and watched the sun slide along the tile grout line like it was measuring something too. When I put the letter down, I walked into the study and turned Charlie's desk back toward the window. Grapefruit, not door. It felt like putting a picture back straight in a museum exhibit. A week later, Harper called us into a conference room at 6:30 a.m. The wall clock ticked in generous seconds. "Vanessa is talking," Harper said without preamble. "Her attorney approached us late last night. She wants a deal." Lydia's eyebrow arced like a bridge that had seen worse storms. "And?" "She's willing to give us detail on her parents' operations in exchange for cap time. But there's a condition." I braced. My hip throbbed its metronome. "What?" "She wants Miss Ward to agree not to pursue a separate civil suit against her personally." A laugh escaped me, short and joyless. "She wants me to waive my right to say my pain out loud in a different room." Harper tilted her head, understanding. "You can still submit a victim statement in the criminal matter, and the restitution order would flow through that. Her calculus is optics." "Her calculus," I said, and heard the accountant's cold in my own voice. "Tell her I'll consider it if she writes the entire truth and signs it." "She won't," Lydia said. "Then we proceed," I said. "Sometimes power is as simple as not giving your enemy the narrative they want." That afternoon, I met Agent Harper for coffee at a place with good air conditioning and a barista who called everyone babe and meant it as a prayer. Harper stirred her iced tea and asked me about Charlie. No one at the bureau had done me that courtesy yet. I told her how he kissed me goodbye the same way every morning, hand on the back of my neck, a press of lips that said both "don't forget" and "come back to me." I told her how he refused to buy new tools if he could fix the old ones, and how my grief lived most loudly in Home Depot. "I married the job," I said, "and then I married a man who forgave the job. When he died, the job tried to move into the empty space." Harper nodded. "My wife says the job is a bad roommate, leaves its dishes in the sink, doesn't fold laundry." "You have a wife?" I asked, surprised by the modesty in her ring's sparkle. "I do," she said softly, "and a mother who trusts everyone at church with her wallet, so I take cases like yours personally." "Don't," I said, but I smiled when I said it. By sunset, the sky turned the exact bruised lavender of my wrist the day Gregory grabbed me. Lydia sat on my couch with a legal pad and a glass of seltzer, and I sat on the floor with a bag of screws. Putting the antique hinge back on the cabinet Charlie fixed 6 times because he loved the stubbornness in it. We were making the house tell the truth about who it belonged to, one hinge at a time. The detention center's visiting room tried too hard. Sunny paint, a poster about vocational programs, a vending machine with 3 kinds of cookies that tasted like the inside of the wrapper. Daniel sat with his hands flat and his posture perfect, like he could hold himself together by obeying imaginary rules. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm not here to absolve you," I answered. It felt important to put that on the table first, like a boundary line made of something heavier than air. "I'm here to tell you the part that's mine," he said, surprising me. "Not Vanessa's, not her parents'. Mine." He told me about the first bad investment, a can't-lose crypto play pitched by a coworker with a smile too wide and a car too new. He told me about the second bad investment designed to cover the first, and the third designed to cover the second. He told me how debt rearranged his brain, how fear made a home behind his ribs and started decorating, how vanity convinced him he could fix it without asking for help. Gregory offered a bridge loan to tide me over. he said, voice flat with shame. He drafted paperwork so complicated I signed just to make the panic stop. I signed things I didn't read. It felt like a cliff, and he handed me a parachute packed with rocks. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. For once, I didn't try to make my voice sound like anything other than what it was. "Because you would have said the 3 sentences I needed and hated," he said, almost smiling at the memory of me. "You're not the first person to mess up. We can fix numbers. Don't lie to me." And I was already lying. Silence stretched into something almost warm. Sometimes the truth, once it catches fire, behaves like a hearth. Sometimes it just burns the house down. "There's a letter from Dad," I said, pulling the envelope from my bag, the one I'd found hidden in the back of the desk in a slot he carved with a pocket knife. "He wrote it the week before he died. He told me to give it to you when I thought you needed it more than you wanted it." Daniel took it like a sacrament. His thumb traced his name on the front. "I don't deserve," he started. "No one deserves grace," I said. "That's what makes it grace." He unfolded the paper and read. I watched his face learn new information about a man he thought he'd fully known. Whatever Charlie had written about the kind of man he hoped his son would be, about work and marriage and torque wrenches and the price of walking past truth, Daniel folded those words up and put them behind his heart. I could tell. "The U.S. attorney offered 5 years, likely 3 with good behavior," he said quietly when he finished. "If I testify to the mechanics of their fraud, if I help them recover what they can for the people we hurt." "Take it," I said. "Earn the mercy you ask for. Can you—" He stopped, the way men do when they're teetering over a canyon they dug. "Can you ever forgive me?" I took my time answering. The clock on the wall ticked like it was being paid by the sound. "Forgiveness isn't an event," I said. "It's a practice. Today I can practice believing you're more than the worst thing you did. Tomorrow I'll have to practice again. There's no shortcut." He nodded, a single sob breaking loose and then held hard. "I'll write," he said. "Don't write to me the way you think a good man writes," I said. "Write to me the way you actually are." A guard's keys jingled. Daniel stood. We did not hug. Sometimes love looks like not confusing what we need with what we want. "Mom," he said as the door opened, and I felt the word land on the table between us, solid and familiar and not enough, and yet something. Outside, Lydia waited with the car idling and the air conditioning on full blast. Phoenix heat in May is an argument. The air insists, and you either agree or you die tired. "How'd it go?" she asked, pulling into traffic with the ease of someone who liked to win small battles. "As well as something like that can," I said. "He'll plead." We drove in quiet all the way back to Arcadia, where sprinkler rainbows sparkled over Bermuda grass and middle-aged men in visors never seemed to sweat. In my driveway, I stared across the street at a house with a sold sign dangling like a necklace from a woman who thinks plain is chic. The buyers were a retired pair from Minnesota who said oofta and made cookies when they introduced themselves. They wanted a winter place. They had no idea they'd almost walked into a machine designed to strip them for parts. When Lydia left, I made a list, because that is how I fix what panic breaks. I wrote, locksmith, insurance recheck, security system codes to rotate, bank flags renewed, new file cabinets, find the recipe box, if it exists. Ask Harper about the nurses' cooperation. And I wrote, smaller, Call the neighborhood association. Offer to teach a seminar on power of attorney pitfalls and predatory loans. If the Pikes had a net, I could build a knife. At midnight, I sat on the porch swing and let the chain creak me into the past. Across the street, cicadas sang like electricity. I took a pen out of my robe pocket and wrote 2 words in the dark, big letters so I could see them when the morning came. Begin again. You can make a life out of waiting rooms, dermatologists, DMV, arrest processing, provisionals. The FBI's conference room had become ours, a temporary office with terrible chairs. This time, Harper didn't waste a second. "Kara Mills is cooperating," she said. She lawyered up, then folded when confronted with payment records and access logs. She admits to adjusting meds and flagging infections that weren't there. Says Lillian paid, Vanessa directed, and Gregory was too important to be bothered with details. "Too important," Lydia muttered, the breathtaking banality of evil. "Any indication they wanted more than time?" I asked. My voice managed to be both flat and shaking. I didn't know a voice could do both until the last month. "Text messages walk right up to the line of intent," Nguyen said. "References to worst-case payouts, financial planning that includes you being out of the home permanently, and, this is the hard part, a life insurance policy taken out 6 months ago. Beneficiary listed as Daniel. Signature looks forged. We'll know soon." The room tilted a degree to the left. "They planned a world where I never came home," I said. "A world where the swing rusts and the grapefruit falls and rots and the recipe box gets thrown out because it doesn't fit in a drawer with no soul." Harper slid a tissue box toward me, the way women do when they've had to watch too many women be brave. I didn't cry, not then. I would later, unpretty and loud in a shower, too hot to be sensible. But in that moment, I was a bank officer again, building a case with pens and patience. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Impact statement," Harper said. "For the court, and a choice. Vanessa wants to plead but is balking at the overt violence implication. If we press that charge, we risk a longer fight. If we let it sit as attempted elder abuse with medical interference, it's cleaner." "Cleaner," I said, hearing the cruelty of justice dressed as comfort. "What gets the most people safe the fastest?" "Elder abuse with medical manipulation," Lydia said, pragmatic as a locksmith. "Add the financial counts and the conspiracy. They'll stack. We can help the other families too. There are 17 identified so far." 17, I repeated, and felt my purpose snap into place like a seatbelt. Then we do the thing that helps the most people. That evening, the sun set like a bruise and the house glowed the old gold of routine. My neighbor, Evelyn next door, we share a name like a borrowed sweater, left a casserole on my porch because we are Arizona women, and this is what we do when we can't fix what's wrong. I ate 2 bites standing over the sink and then drove to St. Luke's. I asked for the patient advocate, and then I told her a version of my story that fits on a page. "You need new protocols," I said. "Flag POAs under stress. Build a system that alerts when an off-shift nurse accesses charts. Make families show proof of identity in ways that can't be faked by a PDF template anyone can buy online." She took notes and looked exhausted. I have spent a life in rooms where people nod and then don't. I hoped she would. On my way out, a volunteer with pink hair and orthopedic sneakers touched my elbow and said, "I'm glad you came back in walking." I didn't know what to do with the tenderness of that sentence. I kept it. Back home, I pulled the yellow legal pad closer and drew boxes and arrows until a plan emerged. A foundation, an education curriculum, legal clinics at churches where people still hand their purses to strangers, a hotline staffed by retired fraud investigators who missed the work but not the politics. I wrote, "The Ward Center for Elder Justice." Then I crossed it out, too stiff, and wrote Charlie's Porch instead. The place where we told the truth and nobody had to pretend. In bed, I slept for 4 hours without waking. That is a kind of miracle you can't return. Only spend wisely. Spring is loud in the desert if you know how to listen. After one good rain, the brittle bush catches fire with yellow, and the doves nest in places that make you scold them. Cactus arms, gutter bends, the crook of a porch light, like they're daring gravity to try something. 6 weeks had passed. Harper texted me case updates like postcards from a war. Search yields, subpoena returns, interviews added. Kara's cooperation led the Bureau to 2 families in Sun City who'd lost their houses after hard money loans matured like a trap. The city planning office withdrew the rezoning docket item when they realized the petitions were made with forged signatures. In Scottsdale, Gregory's golf foursome stopped inviting him to tea times. I took petty pleasure. I didn't pretend away. I went room by room and undid what could be undone. I found my recipe box under a blanket in the attic, warped at the corner, cards smudged with butter and grief. I cried over my mother's handwriting on the molasses cookie card, the way she looped the L like a flourish on a baton. I replanted the orchids. I scrubbed baseboards and forgive me to the house under my breath. It is astonishing how much repair looks like cleaning. Neighbors began dropping by to check on me, bringing scones and stories of their own almosts. I signed a thing I didn't understand, a retired teacher admitted, eyes wet. My nephew sorted it out, but I still feel like I did something wrong because I don't speak banker. "You speak human," I said. "Bankers can learn." I started a Wednesday night circle at the community center. Elder Savvy, we called it, because even in age we deserve to feel sharp. Lydia taught us how to read a deed. A young cop with a buzz cut and kind hands talked about safe internet habits. Harper came once out of uniform and explained how to report something without feeling like a snitch. We laughed until we cried when Mrs. Patel called a phishing email too needy and deleted it with a flourish like a magician. Vanessa pled finally, 18 years. Gregory took 20. Lillian, 15. Kara received 8 with cooperation. The judge spoke about betrayal and shame and what it means to prey on the trust that knits a city together. I spoke too, my impact statement written and then rewritten until it didn't taste like revenge. I said, "You took my house and tried to turn it into a business plan, but a house is a sermon. It teaches the people who live in it how to be. Mine taught me to fight with the lights on." Daniel stood in the back, head bent, waiting for his day that was coming. He didn't catch my eye and I didn't go to him. Sometimes mercy is in letting a person stand exactly where they put themselves. The night after the sentencing, I sat on the porch swing with my neighbor, Eleanor from across the street, retired lit professor with a streak of mischief. She handed me a glass of iced tea and asked if I'd ever thought about dating again. I laughed like a teenager. "Eleanor," I said, "I'm 68. I have a new alarm system and a lemon tree. I'm booked." "I suit yourself," she said, smiling. "But the Music Society is doing chamber concerts again. Come with me next Saturday. We can pretend the violas are making sense." I said yes, because saying yes is the sneaky way you build a life. At midnight, I walked the length of the house without my cane. It was more symbolic than smart, but I wanted the floorboards to feel my full weight. In the study, I ran my palm over the desk smooth with Charlie's elbow ghost, and I whispered, "Look, 3 months into his term at a minimum security facility outside Tucson, Daniel asked if I would visit. I said yes, and then stared at the calendar like it might answer for me. The drive south is scrub and sky, a long sermon about scale. I counted saguaro, made a game of the ones with more than 4 arms. At a gas station near Picacho Peak, a kid in a Pima Community College hoodie held the door for me and said, "Ma'am," like a benediction. The visitation room had that particular varnish of enforced hope. Cheery flyers about re-entry programs, a bulletin board with photos of dogs available for adoption through an inmate training program. Daniel looked smaller. Prison shrinks people before it teaches them anything. He wore beige and a humility I decided, for the sake of both of us, to believe was real. "Hi," he said, and smiled the way he used to when a joke had gone badly and he wanted me to know he knew. "Hi." We talked about small things first because big things are disrespectful until you earn them. He'd started taking a carpentry class. He helped in the library on Wednesdays. He'd lost weight and gained, he said, a respect for sleep that wasn't full of lies. "There's a guy here who prays before meals even if the food is terrible," he said. "He thanks God for the hands that cooked. I don't know what I think about God, but I can get behind thanking hands." "Your father would approve," I said. "He thanked his tools before he put them away. Drove me nuts." Daniel laughed, and for a second my chest did that old silly ache of joy. When the talk quieted, he looked at me like a man about to jump into cold water. "I read Dad's letter every week," he said. "Sometimes more. It doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel right-sized." "Good," I said. "Relief is not the point." He nodded. "I want to come home different," he said. "Not performatively different, actually. Start now," I said. "Write to the people you hurt, not to ask for understanding, to acknowledge the harm, then accept if they never write back." He swallowed. "What about you?" "I'm here," I said. "I'll be here next month, too." He put his hand on the table, palm up, and I put mine on top of it because I am not stone. The rules don't allow more than a quick touch, so we made it quick and let it be enough. On the way out, a corrections officer with laugh lines asked if I needed directions back to the freeway. "No, thank you," I said, and she lowered her voice and said, "It matters when moms show up." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Back in Phoenix, the orange blossoms were mercifully late that year, and the scent hit me like a memory of first kisses. Eleanor and I sat through an hour of violas and clapped like our lives depended on it. After, at a bakery, a woman from Elder Savvy waved me over and said, "My sister avoided a scam because of what you taught. She wanted me to tell you you saved her house." I said thank you, then cried in my car in the parking lot because sometimes the world hands you a receipt and writes in the margin, "Worth it." 6 months moved like water over rock, loud at first, then steady. The house took me back in pieces. The grapefruit tree gave 3 good fruit after a summer of sulking. I learned the new security system without resenting it, though sometimes I still jiggled the old lock out of habit, and the house forgave me. Charlie's porch launched with an embarrassment of enthusiasm. Lydia wrangled a board that included a retired judge, a deacon with a gift for logistics, a nurse practitioner who knew the difference between compassion and being fooled, and a tech kid who said, "Attack surface a lot and meant well." Harper sat on our advisory council because even federal agents need something to do that reminds them their work touches kitchens and carports. We hosted our first clinic in a church basement that smelled like coffee and old songbooks. 40 people came, then 60. Then we moved to the fellowship hall. We taught about POAs and predatory lending and how to say, "I'll get back to you after I talk to my attorney." Even if your attorney is a pamphlet we printed, we offered notarizations. We made sure everyone left with a list of phone numbers that rang to humans. We told people they were not dumb for trusting. We told them trust is community's currency. We just have to print better bills. The Pikes properties started boomeranging back through court orders, settlements, and, in one case, a righteous grandson who tackled a forged deed like it was a varsity sport. A city council member came to an elder-savvy night and asked if I would speak at a policy workshop about zoning petition safeguards. I wrote testimony that sounded like me and not a white paper. Daniel wrote every week. He never once asked me to do anything on his behalf. He told me about a man who cried when he read Steinbeck for the first time, about a fight broken up with a joke and a pack of Pop-Tarts, about the way the desert looks through chain link, ugly and beautiful at the same time. He told me he'd started meeting with a prison chaplain who doesn't ask him to believe anything, but makes him sit in silence for 10 minutes, and how those 10 minutes are the hardest work he does. Vanessa wrote once through her attorney, a letter written in legalese so dense I could have used it to insulate the attic. I put it in a folder labeled "Not Mine to Fix" and took a walk. On a Saturday, Eleanor and I planted milkweed for the monarchs. Kids on scooters swarmed our ankles with the urgent joy of small mammals. A man walking a greyhound slow enough to honor its past life as a rocket waved. The block had survived the net. It would remember the net, and it would know how to cut it next time. At dusk, I made molasses cookies with my mother's card and took a plate across the street to the Minnesota couple. We sat on their new patio and swatted at mosquitoes that had the audacity to be in Phoenix. I told them about the grapefruit cycles and when to prune and the history of the neighborhood's stubbornness. They asked about Charlie, and I told them he wore his baseball cap backwards when he was fixing anything because he was not the kind of man who took a brim into a tight space. The air smelled like irrigation and flour, and for a moment, long enough, I believed in uncomplicated sweetness. The day of Daniel's resentencing review, good behavior noted, programming completed, a recommendation shaved off months the way you shave a door that sticks, I pressed a napkin into my purse and told myself it was for sweat and not for tears. The courtroom didn't care about my reasons. It cared about calendars and clear speech. Daniel stood in his beige posture good again, but not rigid with performance, balanced the way a man learning carpentry learns to stand, feet set to spread the weight. The judge spoke, and the law did what it does when it is at its most merciful. It measured. It took into account everything that could be counted and listened, even briefly, to what could not. Daniel's sentence reduced by 6 months. He nodded like a man given a broom and told to make a floor shine. When it was my turn to speak, I said the thing that felt most like truth. He is my son. He is not the sum of these docket numbers. He is also not exempt from them. The judge looked at me with the tired kindness of a man who's heard every version of that sentence and still appreciates it. Outside, the sun did what it does, poured itself onto everything, even us. Daniel shook his attorney's hand and then walked to the edge of the steps where he could see me without a marshal between us. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Keep doing the boring good," I said. "It's the only kind that lasts." He smiled, a real one this time. "I'll write. I'll read." Time passed like coins dropped into a jar, clink, clink, proof. At Charlie's porch, we secured our first grant from a foundation run by a woman who'd lost her own mother to a paper thief. We hired a part-time counselor to sit with people whose shame was louder than their facts. We put together a curriculum for high school seniors about spotting fraud so they can teach their grandparents, because dignity moves both directions. I went back to St. Luke's with Lydia to present the new patient access protocol to a room full of nurses and administrators who looked like they'd been through a year without sitting down. I told them thank you first. Then I told them their charts saved lives and could also be weapons if they didn't lock their sheaths. The head nurse squeezed my elbow after and said, "We needed an Evelyn to march in here." I laughed. "So did I said. Eleanor and I went to more concerts. She flirted with a widower who wore socks with sandals and made it look like a choice. I joined a book club that argued about endings like they were elections. I replanted the front bed with desert lavender because the bees deserved it. On a Tuesday afternoon that didn't look important, I stood in the doorway of the study and felt the house settle around me like it had accepted my weight again. The desk faced the window. The swing creaked. The recipe box sat open, cinnamon and paper rushing the air. I took out a blank card and wrote a new recipe. Start with a woman who refuses to be small. Add a lawyer friend who knows where the bones are buried. Fold in federal agents who understand kitchens. Season with neighbors who show up with scones. Bake with time and a son that refuses to quit. Serve on a porch to anyone whose trust has been chewed on by wolves. When the light got long, I called Daniel's name in my chest the way I used to call him in from the street at dinner. It is not forgiveness. It is not forgetting. It is a practice, and I am better at it than I was yesterday. That night, I sat outside with a cup of tea and watched a storm try to gather over Camelback, dissipate, try again. The desert teaches you to love what comes and what doesn't. It teaches you to store what you can and spend it wisely. If you told me a year ago, I'd be grateful for anything about this, about the indignity of being thrown out of my own home, about signatures that weren't mine, about charts accessed by a woman who needed money and chose my body to collect it, I would have looked at you with a bank officer's polite horror. But gratitude isn't an endorsement. It's a recognition. The wolves are in the valley, but so are we. And I have a swing and a pen and a city full of hands.